Hi and welcome to my video series on Microsoft Visual Studio. Last lesson we looked at creating a relational schema using database diagrams in Microsoft SQL Server. This lesson what we're going to do is look at ways of being able to use the SQL Server data through the Visual Studio IDE, the interface. So at the moment we're actually in Visual Studio, and what we've got over here is our Server Explorer, but what we want to do is move away from the Server Explorer and go back to our IDE. So the way that we do that is we can click on Toolbox, and at the moment it's not showing anything because I'm not on my default ASPX page. We can double click the ASPX page like so, and that will actually bring us back to our default ASPX, and that's probably the easiest way of doing it. If you wanted to, you can close these diagrams. I'll just close them. I won't bother saving them. I will save it just in case. Okay, so just right click on them and then basically they will close on the pretty quickly. Just close the other one there, so I don't need them for the time being, and close. So at the moment I'm on my default ASPX page. So over in my Server Explorer, we know that we've got these tables, these SQL tables here, and I want to actually get a subset of data from this particular database. Okay, so what I might do, again, this is something that you need to do as part of the design of your project or as part of a database project. You need to decide on what kind of forms that you need to have in your project. And in this particular example, what I've decided to do is I'm going to create a form that allows me to manage students in my particular course. So remembering that this is a web page and not a Windows form, so it's a lot more difficult to handle your controls, and what I recommend for all students is to really use tables where possible to be able to control the justification, left justification, right justification of items within the ASPX page. So the first thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to insert a table. And I'm just going to do a table of 3 rows and 1 column. Pretty straightforward. Actually, might make a few more rows there. And I'll just go OK. So what I can do, like in all Visual Studios, I can go to my toolbox and I can put a label in here, and I can call this, and I can treat this like any other Visual Studio application. Okay, so I've got my label here. And like any other Visual Studio application, I can go to that object and I can change the name of it, and I'm just going to call this one Manage Students in Course. And what I can do is I can also, on the background color if I wanted to, I can put in a nice blue, and that does that. So I might go and change my label here, and I might change the fore color and make it white, and that should be okay. And I might even make my text a little bit bigger if it gives me the option. It does. So size, we might just make that medium. Might even make that a bit larger maybe. Cool, I've just made that extra large. Okay, so I want to get the data out of SQL Server. This is pretty straightforward to do, pretty straightforward thing to do. And you'll see here over in your toolbox that all the controls that you can have on in Microsoft Visual Studio can be found on the left-hand side in your toolbox. And you can see here that they're categorized by certain control types. In this case, what we want to do is we want to look at our data. So the first thing I need to do is I need to drag on a SQL data source. So what's a SQL data source? Well, a SQL data source allows us to take any subset, or if you want the whole lot, but any subset of information that sits on your SQL data source. So it allows you in this particular example to just choose student table and take student information out of that table. We then need to display that data that we choose as part of the data source set, and the way that we do that is we do that by using a grid view. So I'll just put in a grid view as well. So we need to configure our data source, and the way that we do that is we just configure data source. And what we're going to do is, you see, it's going to pick up my connection string, which is this one here, which is the one that we want. And I'll go next, next. And it's going to then ask me to say, or gives me a WYSIWYG, which allows me to choose what information I want to have on this particular screen. So at the moment I've got results, but I want to manage my students, so I'm going to click the student table, and I'm just going to click those ones there, and logically I'm going to order that by student name. I'll just go OK, next, and finish. And you see here that it's actually put the data, it's actually configured that data source. But now what we actually want to do is display that data source. And the way that we do that is come up here, and we can simply just choose the data source, and we'll choose SQL data source 1. And when we do that, and hopefully now when we test this particular Gridview, what it should do is pick up all of the people in my database, all the students in my database are in my data tables. We'll have a quick look, see what happens. Whoop, it's come on another screen there, and we can see here that in fact it's picked up all of those people sitting in my database. Cool. So that concludes how to get the SQL data source into Visual Studio. Next lesson we're going to look at how to configure this particular data source and grid view.